What Camilla encountered behind the heavy gates of Clarence House was not the usual deferential bowing of security, but a sudden terrifying shift in the institutional atmosphere. When her personal security pass failed to register at the private inner entrance, the silence that followed was deafening. The responding officer did not scramble to apologize or blame a technical glitch. Instead, he politely but firmly directed her to the side entrance normally reserved for logistics deliveries and administrative staff. In that single frozen moment, everything changed for the Queen Consort. It was a moment of acute visual humiliation. A calculated public shock that signaled the beginning of the end of her absolute authority. What Camilla realized behind those closed doors is that the crown she wears does not grant her ownership of the ground she walks on. This is the story of a secret power grab gone wrong, an administrative ambush that exposed the fragile reality of her position. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact mechanics of the secret power grab she attempted, how Prince William discovered the administrative paper trail, and the silent, ruthless retaliation that proves she actually owns nothing. To understand how devastating this moment was, we must first look at the immense illusion of absolute power that Camilla had spent 30 years constructing. For decades, her life had been a masterclass in survival, a slow, meticulous rewriting of public perception. She had transformed herself from the most hated woman in Britain into the anointed Queen Consort. Sitting comfortably beside King Charles on the coronation throne, she had successfully neutralized the ghost of Princess Diana, systematically removing her memory from the public eye and what appears to be the physical spaces of the monarchy. With Charles completely reliant on her counsel, Camilla began to believe she was utterly untouchable. Her children Tom and Laura, who hold no royal titles and possess no constitutional standing, were increasingly visible at state events, moving through the gilded halls with the confidence of blood royalty. Camilla operated under the assumption that Charles's reign was her blank check, an opportunity to rewrite the future of her own lineage and guarantee their permanent elevation. She felt secure, surrounded by the luxury of the sovereign estate, fully believing that her influence over the king was absolute. But the illusion of absolute power always fractures when it collides with cold, institutional reality. What viewers noticed was that the true crisis began quietly, hidden beneath routine discussions regarding King Charles's health and the massive renovation of Buckingham Palace. When the palace officially announced that the king and queen would not be relocating to Buckingham Palace upon its completion, choosing instead to remain at Clarence House, the public viewed it as a simple matter of personal comfort. What looked like a routine administrative update, however, was actually the catalyst for a desperate, high-stakes gamble driven by commercial desperation. Camilla knew that time was a luxury she did not possess. She recognized that her status as Queen Consort is entirely dependent on the survival of her husband. If Charles were to pass, her title would instantly shift to Queen Dowager, and her institutional power would evaporate. Terrified of a future where she would be cast out of the royal inner circle, Camilla initiated a secret plan. She directed her legal and administrative team to quietly negotiate a lifetime tenancy agreement for Clarence House. Her goal was to secure the historic estate not just as a permanent residence for her widowhood, but to establish a legal framework that would allow her non-royal children to retain access and control over portions of the property. It was a staggering exploitation of her temporary position, an attempt to permanently alienate a crown asset for her own private family. What Camilla failed to calculate was the absolute vigilance of Prince William. When Charles ascended the throne, the public focus was entirely on the crown. But the true shift in financial and physical power occurred within the Duchy of Cornwall. As the new Prince of Wales, William did not merely inherit an empty title, he took control of a massive multi-billion-dollar portfolio of land, real estate, and financial machinery that operates with complete institutional autonomy. William does not view the monarchy through the lens of emotional sentimentality. He views it with the cold discipline of a chief executive protecting a sovereign trust. What we know of this transition suggests that during a routine audit of estate management profiles and upcoming asset allocations, William's legal team uncovered the subtle backdoor maneuvers initiated by Camilla's office. The paper trail was clear. Camilla had been attempting to adjust the security budgets and modify the administrative classification of certain wings within Clarence House, shifting the financial burden onto the duchy while attempting to lock in long-term occupancy rights. It was a silent bureaucratic coup designed to outmaneuver the future king. For William, this was not just an administrative violation, it was a profound act of disrespect against his mother's enduring legacy and a direct threat to the sovereign integrity of the crown that his wife, Catherine, would one day wear. William did not confront Camilla openly. There were no leaked tabloid arguments, no shouting matches behind closed doors, and no public spectacles. Instead, William used the weaponization of administrative protocol to execute a devastating and silent retaliation. He did not ask for Charles's permission because he did not need it. The legal and financial mechanisms of the Duchy of Cornwall belong entirely to the Prince of Wales. William quietly signed a series of executive updates that completely overhauled the security clearances and access protocols for the entire Clarence House estate. The administrative framework supporting Camilla's private initiatives was systematically dismantled within a matter of hours. When she arrived at the gate that fateful morning, her pass did not fail because of a technical error. It failed because her authority had been legally revoked by the future king. To make the institutional erasure complete, William ordered that a prominent portrait of Princess Diana, which Camilla had carefully removed and placed in deep storage years prior, be brought back into the main gallery. The portrait was hung directly opposite the inner entrance, ensuring that the first face Camilla would see upon entering would be the woman whose legacy she had tried so hard to destroy. That detail matters because it represents the total collapse of Camilla's strategy. She was left standing at the side door, exposed to the cold reality of her situation, forced to enter her own residence through the path reserved for subordinates. The realization that hit her in that moment was paralyzing. She had spent 3 decades fighting to reach the pinnacle of British society, only to discover that she was entirely trapped within a system she could not control. Every piece of paper she had tried to sign, every legal loophole she had tried to exploit, had been turned into a weapon against her. She was the queen, yet she possessed no property, controlled no real assets, and could be locked out of her own home by the quiet stroke of her stepson's pen. As she looked toward the main corridor, realizing that her husband's silence meant he either could not or would not protect her from the institutional wrath of the Prince of Wales, the full weight of her defeat became undeniable. The trap had snapped shut, and for the first time in her long, calculated journey, Camilla was entirely powerless. The heavy oak doors closed behind her, sealing her inside a space that suddenly felt more like an elegant prison than a royal sanctuary. Walking past the piercing gaze of Princess Diana's restored portrait, Camilla carried her fury straight to the king's private apartments. She expected Charles to be outraged on her behalf, to immediately pick up the secure telephone line and reprimand his heir for such an audacious display of administrative insubordination. But what she encountered instead was a devastating silence that marks the true psychological climax of this institutional war. King Charles did not erupt in anger. He did not summon his security detail to demand immediate answers. He simply sat behind his writing desk, surrounded by red boxes and official state papers, and looked at her with a profound, exhausted detachment. In that quiet room, the raw reality of the monarchy's future became starkly clear. Charles understood what Camilla was still refusing to accept, which is that the crown cannot fight the ticking clock. Ill, weary, and deeply aware of the limitations of his own reign, the king recognized that his primary duty was no longer to protect the personal comfort of his wife, but to ensure the stable transition of the sovereign estate to his successor. By choosing not to intercede, Charles signaled his implicit capitulation to the new order. His silence was not just a failure to defend her, it was a cold, pragmatic acknowledgement that William was already controlling the functional machinery of the kingdom. This moment of realization exposed the profound commercial desperation that lies at the heart of Camilla's current crisis. To the outside world, she is the crowned queen surrounded by unparalleled luxury and historical prestige. But beneath that multi-billion-dollar public relations facade lies a stark financial reality, which is that Camilla owns absolutely nothing within the sovereign portfolio. The historic palaces, the vast estates, the priceless art collections, and even the very furniture she uses do not belong to her, nor do they belong to her husband as private individuals. They are held in trust for the nation, and their management shifts automatically with the lineage of the crown. When Charles eventually leaves the throne, the sovereign grant that currently funds Camilla's vast administrative staff, her personal PR machinery, and her travel will instantly cease to apply to her. She will not inherit Sandringham or Balmoral, and she will have no automatic legal right to occupy Clarence House. Recognizing this looming financial void, Camilla's secret strategy had been an attempt to secure an independent financial and residential empire before the clock ran out. She had sought to use her temporary influence to establish long-term trusts and tenancy agreements that would insulate her family from the incoming reign. Her commercial desperation was driven by a desire to provide a permanent royal umbrella for her children. Tom and Laura, who remain private citizens without institutional funding, she wanted to ensure that even when she was no longer the sitting queen, her family would retain a foothold in the sovereign landscape, utilizing royal properties for their own private and commercial prestige. What William's administrative blockade proved, however, is that this strategy was built on sand. By cutting off her ability to manipulate estate access and by freezing the proposed budget adjustments, William effectively demonstrated that the Duchy of Cornwall will not fund the lifestyle or the social elevation of the Parker Bowles family. The future king made it clear that when the current reign ends, the institutional erasure of Camilla's inner circle will be absolute. As Camilla's influence recedes, the new order is being established with a quiet, undeniable majesty defined by the restoration of Catherine and the enduring legacy of Princess Diana. What looked like an isolated dispute over security passes at a single estate is actually part of a much larger coordinated recalibration of royal power. Throughout this period of transition, Catherine has remained the ultimate symbol of institutional stability, while Camilla engaged in frantic behind-the-scenes administrative maneuvers to secure her position. Catherine moved with an uncomplaining sacrifice that captured the genuine loyalty of the public and the institution alike. The subtle shifts in royal protocol tell the story of this quiet triumph. Viewers noticed that during recent state events, the jewellery selected for Catherine carried immense historical weight, often featuring iconic pieces directly associated with Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana, signalling her undisputed status as the true matriarch of the future monarchy. Every protocol update, every reassignment of a royal patronage, and every minor adjustment to the royal diary now reflects a deliberate pivot toward the future. The decision to leave Princess Diana's portrait hanging in the central corridor of Clarence House was not a temporary gesture. It was a permanent statement of intent. It serves as a daily visual reminder that the memory Camilla spent 3 decades trying to manage and minimize remains a foundational pillar of the modern crown. The administrative architecture of the palace is no longer responding to Camilla's directives. Her phone calls to the scheduling officers are vetted. Her proposed initiatives are subjected to rigorous financial oversight by William's team, and her public appearances are carefully curated to ensure they do not overshadow the future king and queen. The illusion of absolute power has vanished, replaced by the rigid reality of a strict constitutional countdown. Ultimately, this story resonates far beyond the walls of Clarence House because it represents the triumph of institutional discipline over personal ambition. It proves that within the British monarchy, individual manipulation can only succeed for a season. Camilla successfully navigated the treacherous path from a polarizing figure to the coronation chair, utilizing every PR strategy available to achieve the ultimate title. Yet the very institution she fought so hard to conquer has ultimately used its own ancient bureaucratic mechanisms to neutralize her influence. She is a queen who has discovered the profound isolation of her title, realizing that she is surrounded by a family that respects the crown she wears, but remains entirely cold to the woman wearing it. She is left to navigate the remainder of this reign with the knowledge that her power is entirely transactional and strictly temporary. Thank you for watching. If you found this forensic analysis of the shifting power dynamics within the royal family compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts on this institutional transition in the comments below.